KZ Guy 2 here, and this is going to be a fast-paced overview on how to replace the camshaft in this XR650L. We're actually going to be just getting rid of the decompression system because you can hear when this thing starts, it has a faulty decompressor that's sticking. Let's see if she'll fire up. Boom, you hear that? So it just keeps making that clicking noise. And I did a full video on my main channel, No Nonsense Know-How. At least I think it's going on that channel, so I'll plug a link to that up here or down in the description. But yeah, I had it apart yesterday, and now we got to take it back apart, so I figured I'd do a brief overview. Start by getting your panels, seat, and fuel tank off. And then I'm actually the second guy working on this, but the first guy took the bracket off for the throttle cables, and that does make it easier for getting the valve cover off. I'm not sure if you definitely have to do that or not. But next step is going to be removing the top motor mount, so two 12 millimeters and a 14 millimeter on that, and then all four of the valve adjusting nuts. Those are 24 millimeter. I used a big wrench on them. And then remove your oil line. It's going to be 12 millimeter banjo bolt. There are copper washers behind here, two on each side, 12 millimeter on the bottom, and an 8 millimeter on the bracket. Take this oil hose off too, and I'll chime right back with you. Note that those engine plates are not perfectly flat. They go on in this orientation since it's a little thinner down here than up here. And also this oil line, you don't have to remove this 8 millimeter, but you do have to remove the one on the clutch cover. Take the spark plug lead off, and then down on the alternator cover, remove the 8 millimeter plug and the 6 millimeter hex plug from these two. We want to set the engine to top dead center on the compression stroke, so using a 17 millimeter socket, crank the engine over counterclockwise and watch your intake valves. Keep watching those until you see them start to open. All right, so boom, they're opening now. We know the piston's on its way down on the intake stroke, and once they close, the piston's going to be coming up for the compression stroke, so we're going to be watching for the first F mark. The little click was a decompression, which is right there. That's the fire mark, and right behind it is the T mark, so line that up perfectly with the notch. Now remove all the 8 millimeter bolts on your valve cover. You have one 10 millimeter up here, and they're all different lengths, so make sure to organize those. And this one has a bracket on it. And there will be one really long one that's a 10 millimeter that runs all the way down to here. With all the bolts off, give her a taparoo to loosen up the gasket. You should be able to pull it up. Now lift it a little bit and then rotate it, like lean it over that way, and you should be able to get this 10 millimeter head bolt out. 8x125 thread bolt. Let's see if that comes. Yeah, that came out the other side. And now, when you're taking this off, it's very, very tight to get out of here. So what you do is you come up with it first, and then you slide backwards, like so. Now this is why I say getting these cables off of here. I didn't take them off, but I can see that's probably a pretty necessary step. Once you get it all the way back, you start to rotate it a little bit, counterclockwise, if you're looking at it from the top. And it should clear if you get it clocked just right. Once you clear these, there we go, starting to get there, sliding over a little bit, and boom, then you rotate it out like that. So that's how it comes out. This gasket can be reused. It's aluminum. I recommend clean it up real good and then use some high quality RTV like the Right Stuff. Some residual oil will come pouring out. We can now verify our cam timing. This notch and that notch should be lined up at the top of the cylinder head. And now remove your timing chain tensioner. So it's going to be a 5 millimeter hex right here. You pull that bolt out. And then with some pliers, grab this piece here, twist clockwise and pull out at the same time. Get your pin out. Then you can grab the tensioner with a pick and it should pop straight out. Like so. If you use a screwdriver or anything in here, just make sure not to nick this bore, because if you do, then this O-ring right here will be leaking for eternity. Now I've removed the two 6 millimeter bolts from the cam sprocket. It's if you feel like they're going to strip when they're coming off, then like this one came off, but if you feel like it's going to strip the hex, apply a little bit of heat on the back side of this boss, a little bit with like a tiny micro torch, because that'll help break down the Loctite that's on there. And rotate the engine 180 degrees. When I rotate it, I like to hold my hand on this chain so it doesn't skip teeth by mistake. So what you do is lift up on it a little bit, slide this down, and then like as you're coming out, I kind of hold this bearing right here against the side. There we go. Pop her out. Make sure on this bearing that it goes back in this orientation, because this seal, if it's not on there or you put it in the wrong way, you could lose oil pressure in the top end. Once you have it out, stick a screwdriver in between so you don't lose your time. And that was pretty easy. I'm going to go press this gear off now, get rid of the decompression, and I'll give you some tips to put it back in. Got the cam welded. If you're getting rid of the decompression, don't forget to take this little spring pin out of here too. Wouldn't want that to go flying out and floating around your engine. Should have a little spring on the bottom of it too. Assembly is pretty much the reverse. Put your bearing on this side, and you can see the cam gear says out right here. And we can start sliding it in and put your bearing on this side with the correct orientation. Now if you left the engine right where it was, rotate it so the cam lobes are up and put your first bolt in. Cam bolt, those get torqued to, the book says 12 to 17 foot-pounds. I usually do like 18. I recommend using red Loctite on them too. Clean the threads off first. You can use blue Loctite, but I prefer red Loctite. Stick a screwdriver in between the head like this. Just make sure to pad it so you don't score up that aluminum. Now rotate it 180 to where the top dead center mark is lined up again on the flywheel, and then rotate the cam counterclockwise and hold it there, and these lines should be lined up properly again. Okay, she's timed good. Put your last bolt in, torque it. Now to drop your tensioner back in, they do make a special tool. I'll try and plug a link to that below, but basically this spring has to be compressed all the way down flush to here so that it drops down smoothly, and this should contact the back side of the head here. I showed this in another video, but I like using a zip tie like so. And make sure to use the zip tie that doesn't have any metal tangs in it or anything, God forbid. You position it like so. Keep this right here because that's going to help out when we're putting it in, and push it with your thumb. Once you get it about that far, you can use some pliers or a vise to squeeze it the rest of the way and take the slack out. Should look like this. Grab your pin, lubricate the O-ring with some motor oil, drop it into place, pushing it all the way down, and then lining your pin up. Grab a pair of pliers on this, and you're going to rotate it clockwise as you try to line it up with the other hole in the back. There we go. And as you push this O-ring in, make sure it doesn't tear, and it goes in nice and straight. So position that horizontally. Put a touch of Loctite on this bolt. Loctite everywhere you feel like it, right? Stuff's not permanent. Don't let anybody fool you. And you might have to twist this a little bit to line those threads up a scotch, but once you do, you can thread and torque that bolt down. To get the zip tie out, I like to take an X-Acto knife and a blowtorch, heat it up just a touch till it's like, not cherry red. But boom, heat that up a little bit, and then you can just barely nick that thing and it will separate. Using a pair of needle nose will ensure you don't drop anything in there. Just make sure the whole thing comes out and that the tang is still in place. You wouldn't want to use an old dry rotted zip tie that's been sitting around forever. If it's a brand new cam and rockers, make sure to put some assembly lube on those. Otherwise, light coating of motor oil. And I cleaned both this surface and the valve cover with acetone, and then did a very slight smear of silicone RTV, or the right stuff works excellent too. Ready to put this on. So I like to leave the gasket on the cover since these dowels are on here, and then you slip back in the way it came out originally. Before you put all the bolts in, make sure to lean it over on that side and put this one big center bolt in. And then also this one can be a little bit stubborn too, so drop that in place, and then you're ready to zip the rest of the bolts in. Had to switch cameras because my battery died, but with all that back together, you're now ready to check the valve lash. So I do recommend cranking the engine over by hand from the other side on the flywheel, about 2 or 3 rotations, and then bring it back to top dead center on the compression stroke and check for it's 4 thousandths on the intake and 5 thousandths on the exhaust. Now you do have to make sure, if you have the factory cam with the decompression, you have to make sure the decompression is deactivated, so you might have to go a little bit past top dead center. But if you happen to back these off a lot, like this screw is way backed off more than the other side, then chances are you're adjusting it with the decompression activated. So make sure you don't make that mistake. Altogether, let's see how she sounds. I'm 99.9% confident that noise is gonna be gone. Here we go, choker. Boom. Well, doesn't that sound beautiful? This noise down here goes away. All these bikes make it when they're cold. That's, I believe, the crankshaft gears down there making some noise.